Hey, Tyler here. We recorded this episode with the intent of talking about how much work and effort it would take to create a truly large billion-dollar business. But by the end of it, we started talking about some really deep topics related to the purpose of work and being an overall well-rounded person. So I wanted to clue this a little forward to ask you, please stick around till the end. We get into some really great stuff, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Insufferable Experts. We are the three people you'd least like to meet at a party. We have David the lawyer, Kaylin the tech founder, and Tyler the technologist. So this week we're going to be talking about how much you need to work to build a massive business. So there's a VC out in London named Harry Stebbings. He is also the host of the podcast 20VC, and he made some controversial comments that really got the internet going. He basically said, if you are working on a startup in today's age and you're working 9 to 5, 5 days a week, you're not going to make it. He says that you should be working 7 days a week if you want to build $1 billion company. And so that is pretty spicy. We have our own takes here, and so we're going to talk about it today. So I'm going to lead off the conversation by saying, is it true? Is the only way to build $1 billion company through grinding every single day? Kaylin, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Honestly, I think yes. $1 billion business is huge. That is a massive company, and it takes nonstop grind. Here's the thing, though. I think as we approach, valuations are increasing constantly, and inflation is contributing to that. So we're finding that there are more unicorns than ever, and the rate is steadily increasing. But competition is as well. And my take is that the barriers to entry are much lower. Technology is advancing us much faster. And therefore, it may not be about reaching $1 billion in revenue, but instead about clearing enough competition on your way to getting there. That's really the issue. I think I would never say it's easy to get to $1 billion valuation or have revenues that supports that valuation. It's not easy, but it's getting easier, but competition is getting stiffer. And that's where I think it really does take the 24/7 grind if that's the scale you want to reach.
So you're saying, yes, you are going to have to work 7 days a week to get
Absolutely.
But it's not you're working harder than anyone else. It's that the amount of time that you're spending helps you outmaneuver them in a very competitive market.
I think that's right. I think you're spending some of your time that isn't necessarily building, swatting at mosquitoes and figuring out your next pivot or an acquisition that's going to stifle competitors, because there are so many ways to chip away at somebody's success or kind of come and eat their lunch. Now that, you used to be able to build for at least a few years with clear runway. If you had a new and novel idea, you had a good head start, and that time alone was going to allow you to corner enough of the market to lean into it and build the multiple, right? You can start the flywheel, if you will, and it starts to do the work for you at a certain point, at a certain threshold. I believe that it's getting harder to get there because it is so fast, especially in tech businesses where these big valuations often show up, right? Like there are not as many manufacturing or capital intensive businesses that have this level of competition. But tech is one where the values are higher, the multiples are higher, but so is the competition. So I think you're spending your time differently getting to $1 billion, but you're going to have to spend that time nonetheless.
Yeah. And David, I wanted to throw it over to you because me and Kaylin are very native to tech, where you see these $1 billion and the goal is always the unicorn, right? But like from a services business, curious your thoughts. And I know that a lot of what Kaylin talks about with these like efficiencies and evolving how fast it is, I'm curious your thoughts on how that actually applies into the services industry as well, if you're seeing the same kind of trends or if it's something different there.
Okay, so couple of prefaces. One,
Sure.
we were talking offline about this, about how this is one of the few areas where Kaylin and I totally disagree. We agree a weirdly large percentage of the time for two people who disagree with people on a regular basis. And so it's fun that we completely disagree about something. Two, side note, I think valuations are mostly BS. valuing a company is such an arbitrary and weird art, sort of, that doesn't really have any basis in reality most of the time, that there's a whole conversation to be had about what does valuation even mean. Okay, we're going to bookmark that and come back to that later. Couple of things. I think my thought about the services industry ties into my thoughts about this generally. So first of all, even if what Kaylin is saying is right, I think is a terrible idea. I do not think you should destroy yourself for the purposes of building a $1 billion company.
But that's not the question, is it?
No, it is a part of it's an important part of it. And that's why I said, even if that's true, which I don't think it is, I don't think you should do it. But I also don't think that's true. One of the comments on the post that Tyler mentioned at the beginning of the episode that I thought was really insightful said, quote, when leaders I work with run at this pace, output might go up for a while, but quality always takes a hit, generally through a serious drop of creative thinking or thorough decision fatigue. The stuff that really moves the needle mostly shows up when your brain has space to breathe. So yes, intensity has a role, but without recovery, it's a fast track to burnout, not brilliance, and that's a dangerous game to play and promote. That 100% agree. Working 7 days a week isn't necessarily better or more effective. To be clear, I'm not saying you shouldn't work hard. Work your ass off. That is not what I'm saying. There's a line between working hard and driving yourself into the ground. And I just don't think that driving yourself into the ground is either good for your mental health or good for your business. Because I cannot count the number of times when I've given space to something and been like, I can't figure this out. And then it's come to me when I was relaxing.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I'm going to split the difference on you guys here because I think it comes down to timing. So I think when you're first starting, you could work 7 days a week all you want. But as you're crafting your idea and building your business, a lot happens as well with the market and where it's coming to. So the example that I always think of is like Zoom. So Zoom was a company for, believe it or not, like 10 years before the pandemic. And I find it hard to believe that that founder was working 7 days a week during that entire time. I think he probably had to do a lot in the beginning, get it going, found a comfortable business. But I think you best believe when the pandemic hit and everyone started scaling and ramping with that company, he was working 7 days a week and he was working his ass off. And I think I am of the opinion that you need to give it a burst. You need to get it to a point. And if you give it a burst and then the market takes it and you have momentum, like you better keep going 7 days a week, because momentum is this thing that sometimes can be exogenous and you can't control, and you have to take advantage of it when you can. You listen to countless founders and there are these bursts of time where everything is falling into place for you. And if you don't extract on that moment, it could be a huge opportunity cost. And so I do believe to an extent that you should be working 7 days a week, but I think it is dependent on the situation of where your business is at the time. Because I do believe that, on David's point, if you are working 7 days a week when you're at a point where things have stabilized or you're getting ready for that next jump, those are the times when you kind of have to sit back and reflect and figure out what the next steps are. So if you are burnt out for that point, it can actually hurt the business. So I definitely hear what both of you are saying. And I'm just going to take the middle ground on this one.
But I would say, though, I think that there's a difference between, so Zoom is an interesting example because the market took that.
Yes.
That was a capitalization on an opportunity. Fantastic. Good for you. But if the question is, I have an intent to build a $1 billion business, do I have to work 7 days a week? You fucking better believe you do. And that is because your intent is to build a business that large, not to get the lightning strike and build something that may hit the crest of the tide. I think that was luck for Zoom by virtue of everybody else's misfortune, and not that you decide I'm now going to work 7 days a week to support this. Like, that CEO honestly could have stepped down and said, I love where this is going, but I don't want to be part of this 24/7 on mentality while we're catching up and keeping up. So let me pass the torch and take a nice fat paycheck. But that was a choice that was made with very different circumstances. So again, I would go back to posing the original question of, if your intent is to build a $1 billion business, valuations be damned, because we know how they often come through. So whether you believe in that or not is also somewhat irrelevant. It is, yeah, there's a lot of sort of extraneous information here, but at its core, if you really wake up one day and say, I want to be the founder of a unicorn, I just don't think that your job is to build something you love when you feel good and then hope that it sort of gets swept up in some other timing, fortune, or whatever. Like, those are very different scenarios. So I'll leave it there, but I think that I just think it's a different question. I think those are very different things. And I agree with you on the positioning there. I also agree with some of what David says, but going back to original question, if I woke up and said, I want to build a unicorn, you better believe, like, I've already decided to undertake something that absolutely undercuts your mental health. We know that, but you've decided you want to do it anyway. A marathon is going to ruin your joints at some point. Like, you're going to increase your bone density, but you're going to wear through some joints. You're making that decision. And I don't think there's any two ways about it. There are ways to ebb and flow. There are ways to manage. There are absolutely times you're going to need those breathers. But if you're not ready to say, I'm going all in, absolutely at all costs, then a unicorn's not for you.
So,
Okay.
Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
So here's where I agree with Kaylin about having the right mental preparation for what you're going into. And this kind of ties into our previous episode about talking about what kind of company do you want to build? Do you want to build a unicorn? Having the right mental preparation for building that kind of company is important. Here's where I disagree. I'm going to take this back to the services industry and being a lawyer. A lot of law firms encourage people to work 15 or 16 or 17 or 18 hours a day for 7 days a week. I think that's a terrible idea, not just because it's bad for your mental health. I'm setting that to the side, but because I think your work product goes down.
Fully agree with that, but that's also like, at that point, you are the asset that is just getting extracted. You're the asset, not the builder at that point.
Right, but if I'm paying you $600 or $700 an hour, I want you to give me value for $600 or $700 an hour. If it's 3 a.m. and I've been working for 15 hours, I'm not giving you $600 an hour. I'm giving you $150 an hour work product. So I should, as the client, want you to stop working so that I'm actually getting my $600 an hour. And if you're trying
but the incentives are misaligned. And like, those are misaligned incentives because the firm doesn't really give a shit, and neither does who is largely, especially at that level. If you're paying, I used to get billed out at $11.85 an hour. Like, what? For what? And the thing is, it didn't matter if that was my best work because the client was not a person either. At a certain scale, at a certain point, I am a line item on somebody's allocated budget where they are spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year with this firm, and nobody that I'm pissing off is actually the one paying the bill. So when they notice that it wasn't my best work, or if they're hoping for better work, or if they can't tell the difference between $1,200 an hour and $600 an hour or $150 an hour, when they're not paying for it, it doesn't matter. And I hate to say that, but that's where we've landed. So I think the services business is an interesting nuance, but it's still a little bit of a left turn that has human capital as its asset, where more hours equals more money, no matter the quality. And at a certain point, nobody's going to leave a white shoe law firm because they're not getting the best quality out of its associates. They never have been. We've always been run ragged. So actually, they probably don't even know what my real $1,200 work looks like. I don't either. So that's where I think that's a bit of a red herring. I hear you. I agree with you on that. I really think that's how it, air quotes, should be done. But it's not, and it's not changing because the alignment of incentives is completely off. And the people who are paying these exorbitant amounts are not nobody's looking at that bill. At a certain scale, nobody's looking at that bill. And they're not, Tyler, you know this too. You were in consulting. You know what budget, it's so bloated. It's so crazy. But the people you're working with one-on-one are not the ones who are going to say, you know what, we should change firms because I don't feel like this person's giving me their best work, as if they don't have that authority either. And it's a big shell game.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to dig into this a little bit more, not necessarily on when you get to the high level, it all is just a numbers game, but more on actually, David, what you were talking about, where like, how do you get to that $1,200 an hour work? And so question I want to pose here, and David, I'll throw it over to you actually, is what is the value of pressing pause and filling your cup with other things? Like, does a more well-rounded founder lead to more sustained success? Not necessarily short burst success because they grinded for 6 months, but like in the long term, if you want to make a bet on someone, are you looking to make a bet on someone that's going to be maniacal? Or are you making a bet on someone that has a very well-rounded life that can do these types of exercises to actually bring their best to the table as much as possible?
So surprisingly, I think the answer is both.
Okay.
It's kind of the middle ground. Look, I don't want somebody who's low effort, like, oh, I only kind of care about this. I'm not really that passionate about it. Go away. Right? Like, that's not what you want in a founder. You want somebody who's really passionate and dedicated to the thing and genuinely cares about it and is really attached to it. So, side note to what Caitlin was saying, all of that stupid incentives and the reason that exists is part of why I started my own law firm, because I think that's what Caitlin is saying is true and is moronic. Why are we doing it that way? So I started my own law firm to stop all that BS. And so I think it's really important to have a founder who's really passionate and attached and dedicated to their company and really cares about it, but also grinding 24/7. First of all, just as a human being, I can't endorse that. Ruining yourself in order to make a successful company is not something I'm going to support, regardless of whether or not it's helpful. I want to support the world to be the way I think it should be, and encouraging people to ruin themselves in order to make a company is not something I can ever get behind, ever. Period. Space. Secondly,
Single space or double?
Oh, ellipses. We know how Caleb feels about ellipses.
God!
Exactly.
Horrible! I quit!
Yeah. Caleb, for anyone who does not know, hates ellipses for some inexplicable.
Oh, yeah, I learned that the hard way. Trust me.
We'll do a separate episode on punctuation. I have a lot of thoughts about it. Fonts, punctuation, you name it.
Initially, we were going to have the name of this channel include punctuation, and Kaylin refused. Including ellipses. Sorry. So, getting back to the point.
Just real quick before we miss the thread. If we get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, we will release the punctuation episode for those of you who are, subscribe to the channel.
2,000, we will do an entire episode on typography because I have thoughts.
Okay. You do? I'm
exact. Yeah.
Good. And I'm gonna, Tyler, at 10,000, you can make cover art for one episode that uses Comic Sans MS. I will choke and die, but it's a risk I'm willing to take.
So in addition, following on what you were saying, I think that part of why people like founding companies is it is a blank canvas full of creativity and innovation and new ideas and doing things that haven't been done before. And you just can't do that on autopilot. It just can't be done.
Mm.
And in order to not be on autopilot, you need to rest. Creativity comes in the spaces. I cannot count the number of times when I've been obsessively thinking about something, right? And then I go to a movie, or I make a cocktail, or I'm driving my car and the answer pops into my head.
Of course, yeah.
And
Our
that,
subconscious is a wonderful thing.
exactly.
You just
And
let it rattle around back there, and
exactly.
it's for innovation that is absolutely incredible. And I think that is where, as Tyler was talking about, we have spoken about the visionary versus the executor, because I find that I need a lot of space. I need a lot of space to digest, to process, to let things filter through and feel it in my bones before a whole new tier, a new level, a new layer really comes into focus. But that takes an incredible amount of disconnect, which is really interesting because we have inputs all week long. It's why I go MIA over the weekends, because especially Sundays, Tyler always says, he's like, I knew you were going to be coming in hot on a Monday morning when I heard nothing all day Sunday and I saw Do Not Disturb on. I knew it was coming, because that is like the integration time of all those inputs. You need a minute to let them integrate and settle in and work with all the rest of the things that are in your brain to create something brand new. I think that's a great point, David.
I'm gonna double down on it and say, like, I experienced it myself for the last 3 years. Like, I did try to come at this for a while of like burning the candle on both ends, and like, all right, like, there's so much to do. I'm gonna go till 1, 2 in the morning, and I'm gonna sacrifice that sleep or that feeling, eat like crap, all the other kind of stuff that I was able to do as a consultant, because at the end of the day, it kind of bleeds into what you're saying earlier, Kaylin. The $1,200 work, like, you can kind of get by not doing the $1,200 work
100%.
as long as you're doing the work and you're an expert in that field. So you can get by, I won't say on cruise control, but like, it's a comfortable thing. And then I start to realize, okay, like, I'm getting really tired. I'm getting brain fog. When I want to sit down and do something creative, I'm getting really easily distracted, right? And it's causing me to not be able to get done what I want to get done. And so I had to step back, and I had to be like, all right, like, I had to look at my life and be like, do I have a good balance? Am I physically in good shape where my body feels good? Because the mind is connected to the body.
Mm-hmm.
Am I using the right habits? Now I get to the point where it's 10:30, 11 at night, and I know that I have something to do, but I will sit there and I'll be like, nope, you're going to go to sleep, because you're not going to mortgage the first half of the day tomorrow just to get this thing done that may not be the most important thing, but you've convinced yourself it is, right? And that takes a lot of maturity and getting to know yourself that I don't think you are allowed that space in corporate world, because it's go, 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 deliverable, deliverable, deliverable.
But you're also given direction, right? You're not in your most creative space. You get creative within the bounds of something, right? And you are given a lot of direction. And it's funny, Tyler, you use that mortgage analogy often, and it's amazing. Like, it stuck in my head a long time ago. But it reminds me of an Atmosphere line who it's a duo, and the rapper is saying, like, sunshine hits me dead in the eye, like it's mad that I gave half the day to last night, because he's hungover. But it's just like, I always think about that, like, it's mad that I gave half the day to last night, because when you ruin the next morning, how much is that worth? Maybe if you've got a crushing deliverable and getting it out is the most important thing, I'll be up all night gladly to get something out. But I know the cost that's associated with it, and you have to be prepared to pay that price. And are you? And I think for sustained work, it is untenable to say, I am going to constantly be run ragged. Maybe when you are a 20-year-old in your mom's basement, good for you. You are looking at things with nothing but energy to expend. But at that point, you don't yet have experience. I'm not saying a 20-year-old's not creative. I'm just saying that there's always a trade-off, and you at a certain point are starting to pick your battles and pick your prices.
Yes. Prices. That's a good, yeah. Pick your prices. That it really is about that. There's no such thing as infinite money,
Budget.
even in your life, right? Because then time becomes that. Time and energy becomes the currency,
All
right?
part of the currency. Absolutely. And we say this often. It's like, I get so fussed about people wasting my time because time is the only currency I value. Everything else comes and goes. Only one currency is constantly depleting in its time. So I think that it also takes it might take some really terrible, negative, or traumatic experiences, or it just takes getting older until you realize like life is finite, until you realize, okay, great. How much am I going to allocate? Jesse Itzler makes a great point that has stuck with me and has changed my behavior with my family, which is, think about how old are your parents? Do they have maybe like 10, 20 years left? And now, how often do you see them? Maybe once, twice a year, if you do sort of a holiday schedule. That's 10 or 20 times left that you have to see your parents. That shook me to my core. It was the most basic analogy, but it really, really changed the way that I look at shit. Like 20 times left? That's crazy when you put it into hard numbers. That's crazy. And even when you take those times, what are you doing around the holidays? Running around, everybody's trying to like feed everybody, take care of everybody. These are things that, I'm not the best work-life balance speaker. I don't have a great work-life balance, but I think that we choose what fills us up. And at this moment in this time, working fills me up. Great. But I still have to make conscious efforts. And I know this is a little bit of a detour, but Tyler, I mean, we didn't set out to build a unicorn and say we just want to take over the world and we want our name to be in lights. Like, we want to chip away. I think, David, what you said was really interesting, which is like, I don't want to support a humanity I don't believe in. Yeah. And so I think the same thing. And I think we look at what we're building as something that has material impact, but it's not for our sake. It's because that's the vision and that's the version of the world we want to see. Well, this is how we want to interact in the world, and we're setting that up. But it's not so that we can be the next Zuckerberg. And I think if you've decided that that is your path, to bring it kind of full circle on this one, if you've decided that is your path, you have to be ready to pay the price of that. And to me, the price is you absolutely are working 7 days a week, nonstop grind for many, many different reasons. And then you get to make different decisions at the time it comes.
Okay, so this ties into something I intended to mention earlier, but this is perfect timing, about how we came up with the name for the channel and why working nonstop is not a good idea. We had debated for 2 weeks about what to call this channel nonstop, and we came up with 15 different names. And we were just chatting randomly, and Kaylin made a joke about how we were going to be the insufferable experts. And I said, oh my God, that is a great name. We should call the channel that, right?
How this is a theme.
Right, exactly. But that's my point about we were just chatting about something. We weren't trying to accomplish the thing. We were just screwing around. And I was like, oh, this is the name. This is what we should call it. And that is the problem with working 7 days a week. If you don't leave space for those creative ideas and for just having fun and messing around, then you'll never come up with those sparks of creativity or innovation. So I'm not saying don't work hard. So this is the perfect tangent to the other quote that I loved from that article Tyler originally mentioned. Quote, getting to an exit is 10 to 12 years, sometimes more. Are you proposing people work 7 days a week for this duration? Toxic advice. Work hard and work efficiently. Not taking breaks is reckless, if you ask me. Exactly. What work-life balance looks like to you is variable, and it depends on you. but you have to have some sort of work-life balance. And
Sure.
just tying into what we've said in previous episodes, if your entire identity is this company, what happens when you do exit?
Correct. When you are
Are
tied
you?
entirely to your identity, I think we actually have spoken about this
We
where
have.
you
Like,
don't know who you are without it. That is a big problem.
yeah.
And it honestly supports, not to sort of interject here, but like that supports my opinion, which is that, on this very specific thread about having somebody who has a work-life balance or a robust set of other activities that fill their cup, I believe that that fuels resilience. And so to me, it's less about having the balance. I like the phrase work-life harmony, because whatever works for you is going to work for you. I am not balanced in my work versus life, but it is in harmony because it is in fact the right measure for this season for me.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of that, I think having other pursuits, whether it's I love long distance running and cold plunges and tough workouts and whatever, to me, not only are those hella humbling and keeps my head in check, but they are also resilience builders. And I think anybody who wants to build not just a successful company, but anything for the long haul, whether it's multiple startups or one really legacy building trajectory, is that you need to be resilient. And I truly believe it's what you do outside of work that builds resilience that you can bring into your job.
So, okay, this has been an incredible conversation, and I think we could go on for probably another half hour, but I wanted to kind of wrap it up and say it sounds like if you want to build $1 billion company and be a Mark Zuckerberg, own the world, the answer is yes, work 7 days a week, but know that you're going to be sacrificing things. Some would argue your soul goes with that, as we've seen with some of these billionaires, right? But then it is possible to create a very successful company and do it in a way that is efficient. And I don't say efficient like, oh, we're automating and this and that, but do it efficient with respecting your body, your relationships, the way that you as a human being are, right? And so that is why this is such a hard thing to do. That is a balance that is incredibly hard to strike, and you're going to fail a lot at figuring out what it is. And you also have to be intentional to figure out what that is. Some people don't even take the time to figure it out, and that's just what it is. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. We want to ask you, what do you think? Do you think you have to grind to create $1 billion company, or can you do it with some element of balance? Yes, you're going to have to work hard. Let us know in the comment sections. Just a reminder to, if you're watching us on YouTube, click subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please follow us. And we are the Insufferable Experts. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.